of the Long Island Railroad held me up at the Bay Shore Station. If everybody please stand for the pledge. There are two types of matters on the agenda tonight. If it's marked public hearing and you'd like to speak, there are yellow cards at the front table. I ask you to please fill one out and give it to the staff, and we will call you up during that public hearing. We ask members of the community to keep their comments to 3 minutes or less. And if you're an applicant, we ask you to keep your presentations to 30 minutes or less. First item on the agenda, Rochester hearing, public hearing, Tom Farrell, SP 2022-059, north side of 3rd Avenue and Stein Drive intersection, Brentwood, 23, 25, and 29 3rd Avenue. The planning board is requested to hold a Rochester hearing to hear public testimony regarding the proposed expansion of an existing 2-story ambulance dispatch building and a special permit for a 100-foot tall radio antenna. Site plan modifications and exemption of town of Islip zoning requirements for ambulance use are also requested as part of the application. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is John Armentano. I'm an attorney with Farrell Fritz, representing the Brentwood Legion Ambulance Corporation. Tonight's hearing is a little unique, as I'm sure you were aware. This is known as a Rochester hearing, which is a hearing to determine whether or not the application of the ambulance corps will qualify for a zoning exemption. But I think I'll give you a little bit of history to the site. I'm also here with members of the Volunteer Ambulance Corps, as well as our engineer, Mark Owen from R&W Engineering. We've also submitted to you a booklet which basically lays out the subject property so you can identify the location. I'm sure you're aware of the facility. It is already an existing facility located at 29 3rd Avenue in Brentwood. This application seeks to redevelop and expand the current facility that's on site. It's roughly a 5,600 square foot facility, but is one of the highest call centers in Islip and from what I understand on Long Island. So there's a great need to expand the facility. We are expanding it by roughly 11,000 square feet. It's functionally an ambulance garage with, ancillary uses on the subject property. These plans are for the enlargement to an existing 2-story ambulance facility. The total building square footage will be 30,000 square feet. That's gross floor area. What we're proposing tonight under the Rochester concept is an expansion of the facility. There will be a 100-foot radio antenna, and this is going to be on an existing subject property. But the site plan that's before you tonight does require certain variances. There are variances from the front yard setback of 15 feet, where 25 are required. The floor area ratio was 48, where 25 is permitted. The total landscaping is 4,360, where the requirement is 13,000. The front yard landscaping is 1,300, where 6,000 is required, 6,644. In addition, we are providing 63 parking stalls for the subject property. And as I'm sure you're aware, this property has been held, it's been an assemblage of property. The current building is located on a property that was purchased in 1966 by the Brentwood Volunteer Ambulance District, which was a government ambulance district that was recently transferred to the Brentwood Legion, which is a not-for-profit corporation, in 2023. And also as part of the exhibits we have indicated to you, you'll see exhibit 1 gives you an aerial location of the subject property. We have site photographs of the existing conditions. And if you look at the survey, which is exhibit 4, you see the current building, which is on tax lot 16.1. That's where it currently is improved. There's been an expansion to the west, which has made the assemblage over time. And one of the properties was purchased by Islip from Suffolk County. And in particular, and of relevance to this, because it is a Monroe hearing, we've attached exhibit 6, which is the deed from Suffolk County to Islip and we've highlighted the relevant section, which requires that there be a reverter to Suffolk County if the property is not used for ambulance purposes. So that in our opinion, places this in a governmental ownership. There's an ownership of the reverter, which qualifies this for a Monroe hearing. Monroe hearings or Rochester require that that this board can grant limited zoning immunity from the zoning code. And that's really why we're here tonight. There's a 9-factor test, which I know the board is familiar with. There was an application before you several years ago for the Sayville Corporation, which is another ambulance corporation, and they were also the subject of a Rochester hearing, and they were granted zoning immunity by this board. So we basically sit in the same shoes as the Sayville Corporation. And again, the function of the Monroe test is really to show that there's a public interest that is being served, just to balance the public interest versus the requirement to be in conformance with zoning. So we're here tonight to ask you to balance the public interest versus the requirement of compliance with the zoning code. I can take you through very briefly the 9-factor test. The first two discuss the nature and scope of the government entity seeking immunity. We are an ambulance district, which is serving the fire district, and fire districts, as you know, are a function of state government. They're a subsidiary of the town. So that is where technically we are considered to be encroaching, which is the word that they use in the test, onto the zoning jurisdiction of this board. In this instance, the Brentwood Ambulance Corporation is a not-for-profit corporation. As we've submitted to you the certificates of incorporation, and has been organized to operate and maintain without charge an ambulance service for its members and for the residents of the town of Islip. In addition, as I had referenced, we are serving the Brentwood Fire District, which is considered a separate municipality, if you will, under the state law. And in particular, Lot 17 of the subject property has the right of reverter, which places this property still within the governmental ownership, which is what you need. That's the touchstone you need for the governmental immunity, which indicates that a portion of the land is still municipally owned, which is a requirement for the Monroe Rochester hearing. Again, the proposed function here is for an ambulance corporation. I think we can all agree that this is an expansion on a desperately needed ambulance facility that requires more space, more bays to service the community and to service the ambulance corps that is operating out of the property. Obviously, this facility is serving the public interest, and the next factor in the testing is regarding the effect that the local land use would have upon this proposed development. This land use has been used as an ambulance facility for decades. We are expanding the use, but we will require several variances as your town staff report has indicated. The issue then becomes whether or not we should be required to go before the zoning board to receive these variances, or at the grant of this board, if you grant us the limited zoning immunity that we are requesting, we can proceed to not seek those variances because of the public interest that will be weighed versus the compliance with the local zoning code. That's the real essence of the Monroe doctrine. The fifth factor is to consider alternate sites. And I think we can agree there are no alternate sites for this property. We are expanding on the property. It has the Legion and the town has purchased the adjoining subject properties to expand this facility. So there is no other alternative location that this facility could be placed in. I think if you're familiar with the subject property, it's in a location that suits well an ambulance. It's surrounded by the train tracks. There's a public park. There's an administrative school. We're not in a residential area. So this location is the prime location for the expansion of the subject property, or for the use on the subject property. The sixth factor is the impact on legitimate local interests. The local interests here would be served positively by expanding the facility. They do not comply with the local zoning code, but that's the balancing test that you're asked to consider when we're requesting this type of a Monroe hearing, Rochester hearing. The seventh test is the extent of the public interest served by the improvement. Again, some of these are repetitive, but I think, we have to meet all 9 factors. Not one factor weighs more heavily than the other, but in my opinion, the benefit to the public here outweighs the requirements to seek the variances that we need, which in my opinion are minimal, but this is the planning board. So we're seeking relief from you to not seek the zoning board variances from the zoning board. The eighth factor is the intergovernmental participation in the process. That's obviously occurring tonight. You are one of the agencies. We are having an intergovernmental discussion about the expansion of the district. This is a public hearing, which is also a function of the Rochester hearing, where the public can speak for or against the expansion of this facility. So again, in conclusion, I do believe, and we can answer technical questions because I know there are some questions that were raised by staff, and we're here to answer those questions too. But if you consider this from just the pure perspective of the Monroe Rochester hearing, we believe that this use, the Brentwood ambulance expansion, definitely serves the public interest in a way that outweighs the requirements to follow the zoning code in particular in this situation for the expansions that we need. And again, they are limited. It is buffering and parking is adequate from what has been told to us by the town. The issue that that I think you may want to discuss tonight is the height of the antenna, which at this what has been provided to us is it is a requirement to have this is a metal. It's not a cell tower. There's not any other uses that will be placed on it. This is basically a whip antenna through metal stanchions that will serve just the volunteer ambulance corps. It's not going to be servicing anyone else. No one else is going to be putting on any other type of items that will be utilized. This is strictly for service calls. Again, in the alternative, if you're not inclined to grant the Monroe Rochester balance, we're here to seek site plan modifications from this board. But I do think that this application fits squarely within the requirements of a Rochester hearing. We have members from the ambulance corps here. We also have an annual report that I'd like to submit to the board showing the calls that they receive and respond to, just for your information for the public interest.
Thank you. We'll make that part of the record.
Thank you. If you have technical questions, I know Mark is here from the site plan perspective. I can only answer the legal questions, but we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Go to staff report. We'll come back with questions unless you want to. We'll go to staff report and then come back with questions.
That's perfect. Thank you.
I have no cards for anyone who wishes to be heard on this. Did anybody come in later wish to be heard? Not seeing anyone. I'm going to go to Mr. Gonzalez for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a Residence B zoned acre-and-a-half property, currently improved with the 11,200 square foot Brentwood Legion ambulance facility, which has been CO'd since 1994 and 1995. The proposal before the board tonight is for an expansion of that facility, which will bring the total gross floor area to approximately 32,500 square feet, along with related parking and landscaping improvements and the construction of a 100-foot tall radio antenna in the rear of the existing building. As spoken by the applicant's attorney, as a matter of general edification, this is a Rochester hearing, which is a special type of hearing, different from a typical site plan modification, change of zone, or special permit. This hearing process was created by the courts when municipalities must review the impacts of the proposals by other governments or quasi-governmental entities. The applicant must provide testimony, and the planning board must determine whether the proposal, in part or whole, is exempt from zoning requirements based on 9 factors. The intent of any Rochester hearing is not to deny specific land uses outright, but rather balance the equities of strict adherence to the zoning ordinance versus the impacts to the applicant, which provides necessary public services. So it's essentially an analysis of the necessary operation and mitigating any impacts. A special permit from the planning board is required for the proposed radio antenna. Various relaxations are requested in terms of landscaping, parking buffer, as well as zoning variances for a front yard setback, floor area ratio, and setback for the proposed radio antenna. The initial comments for the proposal, which were tendered to the applicant, were the location of the proposed radio antenna, whether it could be located in a different area of the property or an off-site location were to be considered. Information regarding the eventual use of the antenna itself, whether it be strictly relevant to emergency dispatch, cell service, or would private companies be permitted by the Brentwood Legion Ambulance to co-locate on this antenna? What the minimum height necessary for that radio antenna would be based on their necessary operations, and could the height be reduced? And if the antenna were to structurally fail, what are the fail safes that are being implemented, and how will the adjacent properties not be affected by that? So at this time, staff would hope that those questions be answered, and ultimately, the board reserve decision to allow for all comments to be heard.
I think you answered the second question, which is it would not be used for cell, and you would not allow any other private entities to use it. Is that correct on the?
That is correct.
Okay, so let's go through the other three questions that staff has asked.
Good evening. My name is Mark Owen. I'm with R&W Engineers. We're the site engineer for the applicant. So just going through a few of those other items that you had mentioned in your preliminary comments. The location of the antenna is basically, it's limited by the amount of landscaped area we have on the property. We're trying to maximize parking, and there's not a whole lot of landscaping on the site, and that particular landscaped island is actually within a vicinity of the, I guess, transmission room within the ambulance building, which I'm told by the applicants is necessary to have that antenna within a certain distance of the radio dispatch room. So that is another factor leading to why we had placed the antenna in the location we had. As far as the height of the antenna, we were told by the applicant that the absolute minimum height required for their use would be 100 foot. They were actually looking at potentially trying to go for 120 foot, but they're telling us that the minimum required height for their use would be 100 feet. Now, as far as the fallover concerns that you guys had put forward, what we had discussed prior to the hearing is potentially doing some sort of bracing on the antenna, which would limit the freestanding portion of the antenna to less than the 110-foot setback distance to the nearest property line. So if that's something that the board would consider, we discussed looking at options after this evening and presenting something to you guys to see if that would be an acceptable mitigation of your concern. I don't think there was one more question related to the use of the antenna. Yeah, just simply going to be used for the dispatch purposes. No third party use whatsoever. It'll only be used by Brentwood Legion Ambulance. Is there anything else that you guys had mentioned? And I sort of went out of order there, so I lost myself.
I think that certainly answers the questions that were posed.
Okay.
I think what's key for here, if we had the answers prior to the meeting, we could have had
Right.
staff review them and then provide us with a recommendation. So
Understood.
we're hearing
Understood.
them for the first time. I think had we had them, we might have been prepared to.
Right. So I mean, we haven't known about the concerns as far as the height goes until earlier today or maybe even yesterday. So that being said, I mean, we did hear about the 110% setback requirement, but as far as the fallover concerns, that was not really brought up to us prior to today. So we didn't really have much chance to bring up any options for you guys to look at as far as bracing it. But we will get that to you guys to review.
I have no questions. Are there any questions from any of the board members? Mr. Moriarty?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. At Exhibit 6 of the package you submitted, there are a number of deeds, and I'm just trying to get clarity on who actually owns what entity owns the parcels. I've got Brentwood Volunteer Ambulance District in one deed, Brentwood Legion Ambulance Service, Inc. in another deed, and then Brentwood Legion Ambulance Service, LLC in another. So just give us some clarification on the various parcels and who actually owns them right now.
Yes, at this time, this is an assemblage of property. The owner of all of the parcels at this time is the Brentwood Legion Ambulance Service Incorporation. That is the current operator. That is the not-for-profit organization.
And that's organized as a not-for-profit organization.
That is correct. And just to that point, the important salient part of the deeds that I submitted is the deed from
So
the
the reverse.
county to
Yeah, I
the
saw that.
town.
I just wanted clarity on the actual, grantee, because there's a number of different references. They're old deeds. So there's been a consolidation.
Correct. And we are,
There's one owner at this point in time of the entire assemblage.
that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Ruggieri?
Yeah, I just have a clarification. This whole exemption from the town zoning requirements, that exemption only applies to the proposal that's before us tonight, right? It doesn't extend into the future. Okay.
That's correct. Yes, it is just for this application for this use. Yes.
Mr. Matamore?
Mr. Alvantano, the first thing that came to my mind, and I was a little concerned about the buffer to the north, but it's consistent with the other properties going in either direction. So that one is not really a big one, but the one that concerns me is this: is there a statistical analysis of the size of the Brentwood area that this ambulance service would serve, and how many ambulance services are average, let's call it, in Islip or in Suffolk County? Meaning is there statistical data that says this is really needed? Yes, our ambulance service is good ideas and good uses. Absolutely. We need them. They're desperately needed. But does the statistical analysis show that we need them? It may, but I don't know if it does or it doesn't. There's going to be, I think, a reserved decision anyway. So you'll have some time to look that up. It's a number that can be reached as far as comparing it to other ambulance areas, services, houses, pieces of property, et cetera, et cetera. It may show that it's very badly needed, or it may show it isn't very badly needed. Now, it seems to me that is a question that we should know something about, and so far we haven't heard anything. Now, maybe there is some literature I didn't see tonight that states, yes, this is badly needed because there are X number of homes and businesses in this area, or there isn't. I just don't know. I feel uncomfortable eventually voting on something that may show out, well, we really didn't need it, but we want it anyway. Well, that may temper our decision or at least make sure that we believe that it's a necessary thing for the public in general. So that's the thing that jumps off my page. And it isn't something you'd have to have tonight, because it sounds like we're going to reserve decision for other reasons. So you're welcome to find that out and give that to planning staff so that they can report that to us, so that we see that it's necessary. Matter of fact, it's very necessary. It may be. And you might be saying, nobody's talking about it. It's very necessary. Good. We'd like to see that. We want to accommodate ambulance services, I believe.
And I appreciate that comment. And what we did submit, and we can submit further in writing as you've
Oh,
suggested.
Okay. All right.
There is
We'll read
documentation.
that between now. You got.
And we can also help you with the summary of that if that's necessary.
That's fine. That's all I'm asking is we want to make sure we know what we're doing and that it's a necessary need for the public in general, not just because we want to have another one.
Understood. From my clients have indicated to me that they receive the highest call volumes in Suffolk County.
I feel sort of comfortable that you'll have a good answer to that question, but we have responsibilities too to show that it's a necessary component that should be added to this area. And I think the location's pretty good for it, but is it necessary? If we have twice as many as everybody else is going to have, we might scratch our heads and say, is that something that we should necessarily support? I don't know. The expansion I'm talking about, it's an expansion.
Understood.
Okay, enough said. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anything further from the board? Ms. Cruz?
I have one of my main concern was always the tower and, safeguarding it from, if this is the only location it can go on the property because of the playground or the fields next to it. So, and the other thing is, I don't know if you've submitted renderings. Is this the existing building getting a facelift as well, or is just the new building that's coming up? And do you have renderings that we could see for the new building?
We do not have renderings at this time, but again, to answer your question, it's not just a building onto, it will be a new structure.
But they're not tearing down the old.
They're going to be making it they're going to expand it. So the existing superstructure will remain. It'll be expanding to the west. And to answer your question, as we pull out these exhibits, part of the Monroe concept allows you to, we still will be required to go to engineering to confirm that the engineering for the antenna will withstand the concerns. And if there is a need for the stanchions will hold it and the break point will be something that the town can require that we do. So we're not looking for complete immunity. We can have requirements that we receive town engineering approvals for this particular concern that the board has.
Is there anything further the applicant would like to add?
We're really appreciative to have this discussion with the board. We have provided you with the renderings. We are very hopeful that the board looks favorably on this. I think it's a great community asset and we look forward to your decision.
Thank you. Anything further from the board? Anything further, Ms. Cruz? I would just say we'll have the staff review it and then we'll come back here, and if there are any questions, the staff will discuss that with you or
Of course.
from your team.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your presentation and everything. And I'm going to make a motion to reserve decision tonight based on the fact of the new information that we have here tonight. Give the staff time to review it. Mr. Matamore time to go through the information that we presented to him. And then we can come back at the next hearing. So my motion is to reserve.
Public comment.
Leave the public comment because nobody spoke tonight. So we're going to leave the public comment open for 30 days if anybody would like to write us or present any information.
Perfect. Thank you.
Motion by Mr. Brown to leave the public comment period open for 30 days and to reserve decision this evening. Is that a second, Mr. Matamore? Second,
Yes.
Mr. Matamore. All in
Yes.
favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, we're reserved. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Item 2 on the agenda, Philip Oken, SP 2024-002, southeast corner of Montauk Highway, State Route 27A and William Avenue, East Islip, 64-66 West Main Street. Applicant requests a parking relaxation in connection with a change of use from a professional office to a personal service establishment. Good evening to the applicant.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Roxanne Trella, Dynamic Expediting Services with offices at 231 Islip Avenue, Islip, New York. We are here tonight seeking a modification of covenants previously imposed on the property in 2012 under SP 2012-010. This building predates the zoning code, and since the size of the building and the site remain the same, compliance with the current regulations would be impossible. The previous approval granted a parking relaxation from 27 spaces to 2 spaces. We are here today seeking a relaxation from 36 stalls to 2 provided. We are also here to address the business hours. Under the last application, the business hours were limited due to a change to a medical office. The single practitioner dentist still remains and remains open only during daytime hours. The insurance office adjacent to the tattoo parlor will also remain open only during daytime hours. The tattoo parlor will be during evening hours. However, it should be noted that there is only 1 employee, which typically parks in the 1 stall provided. The municipal lot is right adjacent to this site. We also have had a chance to review the conditions drafted by the town and forwarded to our office by Mr. Gonzalez. The applicant has reviewed all of the conditions, and I do have the signed originals tonight, should the board want. I'll take any questions at this time.
Thank you. We have no cards for a public hearing. Does anybody wish to be heard who came in late? Not seeing anyone. I will turn to Mr. Gonzalez for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a business district zoned 7,100 square foot property, currently improved with about a 5,800 square foot multi-tenant building built in the 1930s. An addition for a post office was CO'd in 53, with another addition to the store in 66. The original configuration of the building was CO'd as an apartment house and store building in 1965 with affidavits and letters. And then that single apartment was converted into 2 in 1988. The last legalized action was a change of use from a store to a dentist's office in 2012. That same year, a parking relaxation from 27 stalls required to 2 provided was granted for a change of use from an office to a medical office. A town municipal parking lot adjoins this property to the south, and at the time, the uses on the first floor were all daytime uses only, which would not conflict with the evening uses that utilize the town lot. The application before the board tonight stems from a certificate of compliance application in the building division for a 1,340 square foot insurance office, which did not possess a CO. 408 square feet of that unit was converted to a tattoo parlor. So based on current parking standards, 36 stalls are required while the same 2 stalls on site are provided. Uses are in operation and no known parking issues have been noted on the property card or have been received by any public comment. The town municipal lot, as well as on-street parking along Main Street, appear to be sufficient for the area. So unless the board has any questions or concerns, staff recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions, which have already been executed by the applicant.
Thank you. I just have one question that I'm just reading on here. Refuse container on property not permitted? Is that something that's been addressed or no?
Yes.
Not shown, garbage removal service to be provided, submit schedule to the town of Islip for approval?
There is a garbage removal company that comes in. There is no dumpster on site.
Okay, so there is no container on property?
No
That's in
container.
light of it. Any questions from the board?
No.
Anything further from the applicant?
Nothing further.
Is there a motion? Mr. Chair. Mr. Moriarty.
I would make a motion to close the hearing, grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Motion by Mr. Moriarty to close the public hearing, grant the application subject to the attached conditions. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Cruz. All in favor? Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Item 3, Brentwood Commons LLC, PB 2023-039, northwest corner of Suffolk Avenue, County Route 100, and Reese Avenue, Brentwood, 739 Suffolk Avenue. Applicant requests a modification of planning board special permit conditions associated with PB 2012-009 in order to increase the square footage of a restaurant along with a parking relaxation. Applicant is also requesting a parking relaxation in connection with a change of use from retail to nail salon. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Douglas Hines, Design Development Group, Stony Brook, New York, for the applicant. We've handed up a site plan dated to January 16th, 2024, showing the layout of the shopping center, which I believe is well known to the board. This is one of 6 centers owned and operated by the Daniels Organization and Islip, generally with high regard from the town, well maintained. I'll address the parking relaxation for the nail salon first because it creates a significant bonus for this parking lot. They're an existing use in the east side of the parking lot. They're moving to the empty furniture store at the west side of the parking lot, doubling their size. However, that side of the parking lot is habitually underparked to the tune of 95%, whereas the eastern section is typically more heavily parked. We've done parking studies on peak periods, Fridays, Saturdays, spot checks on Wednesdays. From October until Saturday, the site rarely exceeds 50 to 60% occupancy. We had 2 instances where it was over 70%, but otherwise it operates at a high level of efficiency. As to the Wingstop, that is going into a very constrained size unit, previously occupied by Subway and subject to conditions approved by this board several years ago. But for the fact that we have added a 3-compartment sink to the lower level, which otherwise would have been storage only, we would not be looking for a parking relaxation for the Wingstop. The 3-compartment sink simply did not fit on the first floor, and the architects have advised me that because of the constraints of the unit, we are restricting ourselves to 10 seats, and those will be fixed seats, not movable. And so, as I say, but for the 3-compartment sink in the basement, which gets used once a day at the end of the day to clean out the pots that are being used during the day, there are no additional employees coming to the site for that purpose, nor certainly any customers. That is our application. We look forward to the staff report and respectfully request your favorable consideration.
Thank you. We have no cards on this. Anybody come in wish to be heard? Not seeing anyone. I'm going to turn to Ms. Wozniak for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The property is located on the northwest corner of Jefferson Avenue and Suffolk Avenue in Brentwood, and it's improved with a 1-story multi-tenant shopping center with a mix of commercial uses. Tonight, the applicant is looking to convert a former Subway into a Wingstop and utilize the basement for storage space. The previous restaurant utilized the basement for mechanical use only. However, since the new restaurant will be using it for storage, it must now count toward the restaurant's GFA, and the previous special permit conditions must be modified to allow this increase in square footage. In addition, a retail space is being converted into a nail salon, which will increase the required parking slightly. The site itself is in good condition, and planning is not aware of any parking concerns. Therefore, planning recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Anything further from the applicant?
Just that we've received the covenants and restrictions today, reviewed them, they've been executed and notarized, they're perfectly acceptable. It's just too late in the day for me to get them here to the hearing. We'll promptly transmit them to the planning division.
Thank you.
Thank you for your consideration.
Mr. Brown.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion based on our staff report to grant the application.
It's a motion by Mr. Brown to close the public hearing, grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions. Is there a second by Mr. Frugieri? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted. Thank you. Item 4, Barone Management LLC, CZ 2022-033, east side of Blydenburg Road, approximately 233 feet north of Mill May Avenue, Hauppauge, 471 Blydenburg Road. Applicant requests a change of zone from residence AAA to industrial 1 in order to construct a warehouse. Applicant further requests a planning board special permit for outdoor overnight parking of registered vehicles as an accessory use to permitted principal use pursuant to 68-340.1C. Site plan modifications are requested as part of this application. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the applicant, Brian Kennedy, partner with Forcelli, Deegan, Tirana. As indicated in the call of this meeting, the applicant is before this board seeking a recommendation on that change of zone application. The subject parcel is approximately 10 acres located on the east side of Blydenburg Road, approximately 233 feet north of Mill May Avenue. Adjacent to the property on the north is a county-owned wastewater treatment facility. East and south are single-family homes. West of the site is the town of Islip landfill. Now, a public hearing was held on this matter back in March 1st of 2023. And during that hearing, the applicant received several comments from this board and from the community. The first plan presented to this board proposed a 138,000 square foot building that contained 30 loading docks and 222 parking stalls. Since that hearing, the applicant has made 7 different revisions and submissions to the planning department based on comments received from the community and from the town. Each of those revisions further reduced the impact that this building would have on the surrounding community. Now, first, the applicant has significantly reduced the size of this building. What is before you now is approximately 122,000 square feet. They've reduced the number of loading dock doors from 30 to 14 loading dock doors. The parking stalls have been reduced from 222 total stalls to 178 total stalls. Now, this site complies with the required 25-foot buffer area and far exceeds the minimum along the southern and eastern boundaries where it abuts residential property. Now, in response to the concerns raised by the residents on Mill May Avenue, the applicant is now proposing an 85-foot vegetated buffer along the southern property line, which represents a dramatic increase from the previously proposed vegetated buffer, which was 44 feet. The current plan calls for a 137-foot building setback on the southern property line. That is nearly triple the required setback. Now, along the eastern boundary, the wooded buffer along the rear yard of the site is a minimum of 85 feet and far exceeds that number as you move toward the northern portion of the property. The rear yard setback of the building is now a minimum of 137 feet and increases to 190 feet toward the northeast portion of this site. These are substantial buffers. Now, along the northern portion of the property, the side yard setback, that is now 174 feet. That is a little bit reduced from what was previously proposed to this board, but that was done to increase the buffer along the southern portion of this property. Now, the revised plan calls for an 8-foot sound attenuation fence along all portions that abut residential properties. Additionally, a 20-foot tall acoustic wall will be constructed at the northeast corner of the site, adjacent to the closest loading dock, to prevent any disruption from the trucks coming into and out of the northern portion of the site. Now, this building will be less than 48 feet tall and nearly undetectable from the residences to the south. The applicant has agreed to use earth tones on all facades, and please keep in mind that this proposed development will remove the approximately 400-foot tall tower that now exists at the site. Now, at the initial public hearing, the chairman raised concerns with rezoning this property to a significantly less restrictive zoning code. And we understand your concerns. There's no empirical data that I can provide to you on why this is appropriate, but what I can tell you is this property has been on the market for over 5 years in its current zoning. If residential use at the site was a viable option, you see more applications than I do. You know that a developer would have come in to utilize this site for residential zoning. Now, the town has consistently acknowledged that a residential use is likely not appropriate at this site. There have been several attempts to develop this site, all of which center around an industrial use, because that is the appropriate use at this site. And the Suffolk County Planning Commission's report concurs with that feeling. Now, the applicant has added a right turn lane into the northern driveway to address any queuing concerns raised by this board or the community. Again, the applicant has modified their plan several times and offered significant accommodations to the neighboring community and to the town based on feedback received throughout this process. They will preserve a significant amount of the existing mature vegetation within the buffered areas. And if approved, the applicant will work with a certified arborist to develop a plan to screen the building and any on-site activities that may occur. Now, I made mention of the Suffolk County Planning Commission's previous report. They specifically acknowledged that with proper noise and lighting mitigation, it is not anticipated that the public convenience will be infringed upon if this project is approved. The applicant has taken every step to accommodate the request that the town and the neighboring community have made. While there is some community support, I can tell you there are several nearby residents who support this project, but were unwilling to come out and speak in public based on concerns with living in that community. Now, I will, you see Devin Kolka in the audience, a longtime community stakeholder. He is a partner in this project. He will be a partner in this project if it is approved, built, and operated. No one will have a stronger stake in it than someone from the Hauppauge community. Now, I will welcome your questions. I'll wait for Sean's staff report first.
Thank you. We'll go to Ms. Colgan for staff report, and we'll come back for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As stated by Mr. Kennedy, this application was previously heard on March 1st of last year. Primary concerns raised at that time were the truck traffic, queuing of trucks on Blydenburg Road, the number of loading docks, truck idling, truck noise, downzoning to industrial from residential, nighttime activity, the proposed warehouses' proximity to residences, and the lack of transition from residential uses. Since that time, the applicant has reduced the square footage of the warehouse from 138,150 square feet to 122,850 square feet, reduced the number of loading docks from 30 to 9, increased the residential buffer on the south side from 44 feet to approximately 85 feet, increased the minimum buffer on the east side from almost 30 feet to 85 feet, and added an 8-foot high acoustic fence along the perimeter of the property. the applicant has added a turning lane into the site along Blydenburg Road at the recommendation of the town's traffic consultant, and has further agreed to limit the hours of operation for the property from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. The number of parking stalls have been reduced on site in order to accommodate the larger buffers, and a parking relaxation of about 10% is now required with the current iteration of the site plan. The buffers on the south and east side are slightly more than double the town's minimum requirements for a supplemental buffer for a warehouse adjacent to residential uses. However, based on the regrading necessary to engineer the site, it will likely take many years to provide a comparable buffer that nature provides currently. And what vegetation may be left over could potentially be sparse. The applicant was directed to explore transitional uses such as solar farm or indoor recreation. As you heard from the applicant, they've advised the staff that those would not be a viable use for this subject site. Lastly, the applicant was directed to engage the community and solicit support for the project. To date, the planning department is only aware of 2 letters to support from the local community and 1 member of the community who spoke in favor of the application at the public hearing. There were many letters and emails that were received in opposition to the project, which the staff has forwarded to the planning board. So if the planning board is satisfied with the mitigation that the applicant has offered and that the staff has summarized above, the attached covenants and restrictions are recommended as a condition of any approval.
Before we get to your questions, Mr. Chairman, can I make one comment on the CNRs that were previously provided? There is one item that we had previously discussed that would be removed from the CNRs if we secured approval. That was the prohibition on use as a package distribution site or high rack storage. That is in item 1A7. In order for this site to operate as a warehouse, that needs to be removed.
Thank you.
1A7.
Correct.
What do you say?
Restaurant.
7's a restaurant.
Minor restaurant.
No. It's not on there? Maybe I should have kept
So
it on.
initially, at the recommendation of the town's traffic consultant, he had recommended that a package distribution facility or high cube storage warehouse not be a permitted use due to the higher traffic volumes. I did speak with him yesterday. I don't have anything in writing, but I did speak with him yesterday. He had indicated that based on the size of the warehouse and the limit of hours operation, it's unlikely that such use would be so intense for this neighborhood. So he lifted his objection to prohibiting that use, just for the record.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Mr. Ruggiero?
I think the applicant has done a really nice job buffering this project, and when it's completed, you can drive down Blydenburg Road, you won't even know it's there. But one of the biggest concerns in all the letters I read from the community dealt more with traffic than the appearance of the building. Do you have any idea of your traffic flows, your trip generation, specifically with trucks, and what hours of the day they would be coming in and out of the site?
Unfortunately, our traffic consultant was unable to make it. That information was contained in the traffic report that we previously provided to this board and was reviewed by LKMA.
Okay.
From that, there were 4 comments provided in that letter, 2 of which read, "The small number of additional vehicles added to the roadway network is not expected to have a significant impact on operating conditions in the area. The proposed parking supply is expected to be more than adequate to meet the demand at the site."
I'm not questioning parking.
I understand.
It's trip generator. I'm trying to get a sense, how many trucks are gonna come in, what time those trucks are gonna come in, when are they gonna go out? I know you don't have a user for this site.
We don't.
But, typical, I mean, the ITE standards for an industrial warehouse, what would they call for in this?
I can provide that to you when we have the traffic. Oh, you have it? Oh, you do? Oh, look at this.
We do have it right here for.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Brian Riley, with Stonefield Engineering and Design.
Sure.
Yes, the we did provide a trip generation report way back early on in this process when the building was a larger size, closer to 140,000 square feet. Those numbers should be included in the report. I believe the town should have that. I do have some quickly updated numbers to show how that actually comes down from the previous report, since the building size has gone down about 15,000 square feet. So I do have some of those numbers. Again, it's not, it's never going to be exact because there isn't necessarily an end tenant yet. But I don't know if you want me to read through some of those numbers at this point, or
Yeah, what, go right ahead. In the morning, how many do you anticipate coming in?
Weekday morning, we're talking about truck traffic only. We're looking at about 38 total. Weekday midday, 39. Weekday evening, 41. So weekday, yeah. So in the morning, it's generally more entering the site.
Right.
So it's like 30 enter, 8 exiting. Obviously, that flips in the weekday evening. We're talking 12 entering, 29 exiting. So.
Okay, and basically the same trucks coming in the morning, unload, they go out in the evening or the afternoon. Okay. That
It's
answers my
important
question.
to note, though, Mr. Frugieri, that all of that truck traffic will be heading south on Blydenburg Road. There will be fully staffed gates at both entrances and exits. The northern access point will be pork chopped so that trucks cannot head north on that site. So all traffic will head south.
Addresses my concern.
Madam Moore.
Thank you. Your last comment, I think was very important to me and to my research in doing this workup of prior to tonight's hearing. I'm very familiar with the site. I was the attorney on Colony Hill. I know that sewage treatment plant better than I would like to. However, it's there and it's not going to move. Your last comment, I think, as I say, was very significant that you're not expecting trucks to go north. They're only going to go south, if I understood what you just said.
Correct.
I can tell you from experience, walking Millway Wood as many times as Millway Avenue, as many times as I did, that the trucks going north at that time to the landfill that was across the street were deafening, absolutely deafening. So, and I do agree with Mr. Ferrigari that the efforts that the applicant has taken to reduce and change and try and do the best you can with this, and I'm unaware, and perhaps we haven't, that the county has gone the other way from what you're saying. The county is supporting it. Well, I think that's what you said, that the
they
county
are.
is supporting well, that's the first that I've heard of it. Maybe my colleagues have heard of that before or read it or whatever. But I'd like to, and I imagine we'll get a chance to study that. We don't have to do it now. But I appreciated the comments. I appreciate the work that's gone in. I worked with Jack Colca many years. He was an amazing, may still be, I don't know if he's still with us, but probably Kevin's dad. And a man that was larger than life, and a wonderful guy to work with. However, when I went up, this is only 2 or 3 weeks ago, to eyeball the site, and I went around and looked at the area, it struck me as being high residential, not residential, $800,000 residential. That horseshoe. Those are all $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 houses. Now, if you're saying, it sounds like you're saying that the neighbors or a substantial portion of them would still think it's a good idea to put in this truck facility at that location, that's something that we would have to take a very close look at. And if that's the case, I, for one, when I went and looked at it, I found it to be perhaps the highest and best site in Islip Town to see the ocean and the sound at the same time. And I'm saying, gee, we're going to help the truckers out. That's true. But isn't this something that screams, in my mind, for residential? Now, you're saying didn't pan out that way because nobody wanted to buy it. Well, I think at the very least, we should, as a board, confirm those findings through you or anyone else that you recommend, to be able to say, nobody wants to buy it. Well, if they heard the trucks that I heard and thought the trucks were going to be the same way, I could see where, that's a major factor that the trucks are only going to go south. They're not going to go north. We all know as human beings in areas with trucks make a lot more noise going uphill than they do going downhill. And that's the nature of trucking to begin with. Are trucks a bad thing? No, our economy thrives on trucks. But do we take one of our prized possessions, I thought, that would fit in with residential? Millay Woods has $1 million houses on them, not 800,000, $1 million houses. If I were one of those, I don't think I would jump to the opportunity of increasing noise. But I have to say, have done a yeoman's job in mitigating that as much as you have. And if it's a fact, it isn't going to sell, and that's not something we want to take lightly in this situation to say, well, that's too bad. That's not our function here. You may have a good application. I was concerned and still have concerns about residential versus commercial at the highest point in Islip Town, but it might be the right thing to do. I'd like to confer with my colleagues and read everything that's readable and say, they can't sell it as residential. Nobody wants to buy it. Why? I'd like to talk to the realtor and say, what's the matter with this piece of property that nobody wants to buy it, and yet it's got fabulous views, fabulous. So to me, it wasn't the slam dunk that I frankly thought it might be. It isn't for me. It's not the slam dunk. You have done great mitigation. You have a great team. And if it's true, and they can't sell the property for squat, if that's true, if they ask $400 billion, they're not going to get it. But I don't think you're a sophisticated attorney who knows real estate, knows what we're talking about. But the numbers have to be substantiated, that they're real, and that a commercial use there is something that the town should consider supporting. Can I be persuaded? I hope so. Certainly the mitigation has been great, and your team has been terrific. So I just wanted to get that out of the way.
I would just ask Mr. Colgan if he could chime in briefly about the discussions that we have had regarding proposed residential use at the site.
Yeah, the staff has had multiple discussions, both with this applicant and the prior applicant, as well as a series of commissioners, that we felt it was worth exploring something that was an alternative to residential zoning due to the viability of residential zoning in close proximity to the landfill. But as a converse, would we put the landfill there in light of the fact that there's residential zoning? Probably not, but the landfill has been there for many years. It's been an institutional use and it's there. So the wisdom of putting, I believe it would be 10 single-family homes. Could it be done? I suppose so. It's Horseshoe Circle exists to the north, and those are very expensive homes, but we question whether or not, that's the optimal zoning category in close proximity to the landfill that's currently operating.
I guess the question is, would someone want to buy one of those houses across the street from an existing landfill, even though it's closed down? There's ongoing environmental issues that always happen with these landfills that you have to contend with and mitigate as they go through their closure procedure. And I think that's what would scare a potential developer away from developing this site as a residential zone.
Further questions from the board?
I just have one comment of Brian's comment, and I understand it. The concern is, at least to this point, I don't have the facts when all that's to happen. I look at that landfill, nothing is happening on it. It's a big green monster right now. I don't know if it's emitting gases. I don't know if it's causing noises. You may have provided that information. It just hasn't filtered down to us yet, but it sounds like it's maybe available. If that's the case, and that is now a benign green hill, that's one set of facts. If it's not, then I think staff's investigation of this, that maybe residential is not a good idea. I might say, oh, that's a different story. No bad things are going to come from the West. They've already done that. They're benign or they're not benign. You're saying, well, they're not so benign. You might know that they're not.
I have not spoken with anyone from the town's Department of Environmental works, but a member of our team, Victoria Ryan, has. If this board is amenable to it, I'd ask her to come up and speak on that briefly.
Sure.
Yes.
I am Victoria Ryan from VRPR, located in Bay Shore. As Brian Kennedy just mentioned, through my activities of community outreach and addressing any and anticipating any community concerns, I did have a conversation with a top official in the town's environmental department about this site. He did tell me that on a regular basis, the town does have to send samples to this day up to the state. It is a Superfund site. I don't know if you know that. The dump is a Superfund site. The level of testing that would have to be done if there was a residential development application, Mr. Mattermore, is much more intensive. To my understanding, that's what I've been told by my clients' third-party consultants. The level of testing that would have to be done on that site to facilitate a residential development would be much more significant than what's being done now. So I just want everybody to have all the facts and all the information so you can make an informed decision.
Thank you. That's what I think we also need is, at least as board members, and obviously our staff does a yeoman's job of working these things up. But unless we've completely absorbed them and chimed in as to whether we think it's significant or not as board members, are we really doing our job to come up with the best use possible for there? And indeed, I'm happy for the applicant's sake that it sounds like there's support for that. It's not the best situation when a neighbor says, well, I don't want to come in and speak. That puts you in a hard position. I've been in those positions. They're not fun. So I get that. But we haven't really significantly, to my mind, as board members, not as the staff, investigated that and say, the information that they've gotten over a long period of time is that the commercial application is the highest and best use, and that's the best we're ever going to do. Well, first to become, and I sort of went into this with that in mind. When I got up there, I said, my goodness, it's a beautiful piece of property. Do we really want to do that for the truck drivers? I don't think they need it. Well, that's not going down the right way, and I don't mean to be sarcastic, but I think it deserves a look that what Victoria just said is in writing. There's all kinds of reasons on why residential should not go there, and that a commercial operation should. Well, that would change my mind. I have to say that my mind tonight was that I was going to move to deny the application at this stage because I was saying, what are we doing? We're trying to put a round peg into a square hole, so to speak, that there's a lot of residential here. And Millway Wood still haunts me to this day that we built Colony Hill. They weren't happy with that either. And maybe they had a point, but there was opposition. And if they were all $60,000 houses, I might feel differently. They're not. I'll leave it at that. I'm pontificating. I apologize.
Mr. Ruggieri.
I just want to clarify a statement that I made earlier about the landfill and its impact on a potential residential development. I by no means are implying that there's any environmental hazards at that landfill. I mean, these landfills are constantly monitored. They go through all kind of permitting from the federal to the state and the county and the town, that all their environmental protection people are reviewing constantly and monitoring the situation there. What I'm saying from a developer's standpoint, there's a perception issue with being locating a residential across from a landfill, and that could impact the potential sale of that property as residential.
And I think that's well spoken, and I felt that way. But I invite all my colleagues, if they haven't done so, you go up there, takes your breath away. Takes your breath away, how beautiful it is. And I'm saying, is this really a good idea? And it sounds like it. Maybe it's the only idea is to go commercial. From what you're saying, that may be our conclusion, but I haven't seen that or had it presented to me. That is the fact. It can't be developed as residential. It must be developed as commercial. Totally, in my mind, changes the picture. But so enough said. I tend to go on and on.
But that messaging has been consistent from the town since we started this application. but residential was not appropriate at this site. And I understand your concerns. I'm concerned that if we do not have a vote on this hearing this evening, this will stretch out even further for you to.
Well, my stretch out in your favor, not to your detriment. If some of what we are discussing is documentable, and I assume it is, the engineer has referred to it, you've referred to it, Brian's mentioned it. So it sounds like there is, and you've certainly done a yeoman's job, you and your team, to mitigate this project and bring it down as small as you could possibly bring it down. But, and the truck issue is a big one for me. The trucks are not gonna be going up the hill, they're going down the hill. Makes a big difference in the trucking world on what kind of noises are generated. Very close to Millway Avenue and to Horseshoe, in my opinion. And I would hate to see people going out of there like crazy if we apply or approve the application. They don't want to be to something that's that noisy. Well, you've brought to my attention that it may not be anywhere near the noise that I've been concerned about.
I will point out that of the letters of support that we received, one of them was a owner on Millway Avenue. He came out to speak in favor. He submitted a letter and had his nephew come out and speak in favor of this application.
That's good.
Mr. Brown.
Yes, at the last public hearing, there was a lot of speakers that we had, not a tremendous amount, but there was speakers that come up in opposition of it. Now, one of the emails I got in reference to this over the last few days and everything is that there's some letters of support that people changed their minds. Can you speak to that?
Sure.
With the outreach that you did?
Thomas Maltagati, who had previously come out to oppose this application, he lives north of this site. I provided a copy of a letter where he retracted his opposition to this site and spoke in favor of this application as presently presented. Scott Barone and Devin Kolka, the developers on this project, have met with the members of that community several times, gone to restaurants, spoke with them, gone to their homes to explain who they are, what they do as developers, and what they intend to operate this site as. I think they've done an incredible job. And if this was not a public setting, I think we would have significant support for this.
All right. And one other question is, it's one of just the very, very few sticking points here, which I think is the size of it. Is there any way you could commit to reducing the size of it?
We
And I
have
think
already,
that would go a long way in gaining support for this.
we have already come down 10, what's that? If you guys don't mind, Scott would like to.
Absolutely.
Innately familiar with the rules. Hi, Scott Barone Management. I mean, we've, as Brian referenced, met with a number of the neighbors. I can't tell you how many kitchens we've had in at this point, restaurants we've gone to, and have been very successful, even with the residents to the north on Horseshoe, where we won a lot of favor there. A couple of them were a little reluctant to come out and speak in favor because they have to live next door to a couple of their neighbors who could not be convinced for whatever reason. Listen, I'm an old school guy. We are buy, build, hold. I can't remember the last time I sold a significant piece of real estate. It was not inherited family money. I started with a pickup truck and a bag of tools 25 years ago. And to that end, where we've started to push, eastward as a admittedly New York City guy, if you can pick up the accent, but I moved my family, moved my firm out to the island now. And I knew that bringing on the right local partner, who's somebody we've known for 10 years at this point, it wasn't a question of you're just going to build the building for us. You're going to be an investor in the deal. And to that end, we have taken, I like to think, every piece of feedback that we've heard, whether it was from the board, from the department, from the neighbors, even to the point of where we got Mike Malagati, by the way, to literally rewrite and rescind his, original email against it and say, I'm in favor of. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think you've got a good use. To speak to your comment on environmental and, what it could mean for homes, I have done over 2.5 million square feet of ground up development at this point for my own account. All right. And I've been involved with a lot of environmental projects. We did a very large state brownfield cleanup program in Queens a number of years ago. And I think the problem that's there is that the stigma that would come along with this Superfund site, to call it what it is, being across the street, although there may in fact be nothing that was that bad under the ground, the marketing aspect, having sold homes and apartments and stuff like that before, is going to face significant headwinds. And further to that, in my experience, I can't speak to the specific rules of Suffolk County, but it is within New York State. And I can tell you that when we did our brownfield cleanup program in Queens, you have to put testing wells in the ground where once a year, somebody from the DEC needs to come out, stick a stick in the ground, pull that out. Good luck explaining that to a homeowner who has a vegetable garden in the backyard or a swimming pool and his kids are playing in a sandbox there. Nobody wants to see that. With regards to your comment about size, you know what, if you'd asked me that question when we first put this application in a year ago, I would have been to the point of breaking without question. All right. We're now in the world that we're in, of rising construction costs still, to my own surprise, spiking inflation rates and falling rents. All right. Is there a little bit more gas in that tank? I'd like to think that there is, but we're under time pressure here at this point. We have a contract that we have to execute on or not execute on. All right. And the way where I think we won a lot of favor with the neighbors that we have had great conversations with and we're willing to persuade, something's going to get built there eventually, whether it's by me or the next guy 2-3 years down the line. The difference between myself and Devin and whether it's Boston Properties or Brookfield or Prologis, that guy is not going to take your phone call as a neighbor when there's a problem. All right. We are going to take your phone call. That's why we went out and sat with them in their kitchens and in restaurants. All right. As in, if their trucks are idling, beyond the rules of what they're allowed to, but the terms of the zoning or the lease, you're going to call Devin or you're going to call myself and we're going to go out and see who that tenant is and we're going to set them straight. That's a level of access that typically in a commercial real estate world, speaking as a commercial real estate developer and owner, you don't typically get. But we're looking to build the right inroads within the community. That's why we brought Devin on board, as opposed to don't just, say you're going to do something, actually stand behind it. So if there is a little more to squeeze here, I'm willing to squeeze it. I don't know what the rules of this works are, but I would need to do it here. All right. Maybe there's a way within the CNRs.
We could modify the square footage limit that's in the existing CNRs. We could modify the buffers that are required in there if that's something that this board is willing to do. Is there a number?
Yes, Sean, Sean, what are our parameters as far as being here tonight to make decisions?
I have a suggestion in the way of a motion, and I'll probably be the person who makes the motion in any event right now because I've done a lot of talking about it tonight. But there's been a lot of intelligent pushback from your group, and this is important for you. And I know the time, unfortunately, works against you. Money doesn't grow on trees. And if this gets delayed for 2 months, 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, it's going to kill you. I get that. I've been in that business. I'm suggesting that we do a reserved decision to review all the data that you put on the record tonight, some of which I didn't know about. I'd like to have the names of the neighbors. So if and when they come and bitch and moan it to us 3 months from now or 3 years from now, we say, didn't you sign this document? You were in favor of exactly what they built? Now, we're not working for you. No, of course not. But do we want to also to hurt your project or hurt what you're trying to do? We're not in favor of that either. And it's frankly not I think the feeling of this board or of the town board for that matter. We don't want to stifle progress and making money is not a dirty word. It's a good thing. But if we've heard new things that we don't completely know the answers to, I'm suggesting if it's a 2-week adjournment, I'd take 2 weeks. I'm not talking about 2 months or 2 years to be able to see the documents that you can provide. The environmental situation does scare me. Maybe they're dipping that thing all the time or pollution. Maybe they're not. They may say to me or to us, we're not going out there anymore. What are you, nuts? It's all done. I don't know that. I don't know it one way or another. If that's the case, it certainly I think, and your team has done a great job tonight in preparing for this hearing, getting this out, that I think, owe to you, not kill your project, research what you've given us, do it in a very short period of time. It's not like
Madam
we
Moore,
don't know about.
I'm going to agree with your comments, just to,
Yeah,
if
bounce
we
it
can hold
off.
for 1 second. I just want to ask any of the board members have any questions.
I'm sorry.
So let me go to Ms. Cruz, then I have some comments, then I'll turn back to both of you.
Thank you.
Okay?
Sorry about that.
Just to concur with Mr. Matamor, I think I would feel comfortable if you actually had the support of those on Mill
May.
May Ave, because from what I also saw, that those some of the in the staff report, that the some of the vegetation would may be impacted. So like they're going to see this building, even though you're putting all this stuff in, but they're going to really see it, because if that vegetation gets affected by it, because you have to take it down and then now you have to start over or add, they're going to be impacted. And I'd like to see that they are the most, in support, especially because they're also going to have an entrance there. I see from this here, you have like electric car charging stations, so there'll be cars parked there, even though you have you did make the buffer bigger, and that's great. But I do think that the building may be a little bit smaller, and getting the support of those neighbors, like actually like, giving you something in writing, or, just something to say that this is okay for them, because they're going to be impacted the most, especially if you do have to take down some of those trees and the vegetation in their backyards.
Well, we have the support of one neighbor on Mill May, and then one neighbor came out and spoke at the last hearing a year ago, and nobody else really wanted to.
Can I too just agree with Ms. Cruz, Mr. Matamor, and Mr. Brown? I think you're on the fence right now of tipping it either way, in favor or opposed to this project. There's been a lot of back and forth on it. I know you want to vote tonight. I'm afraid if the vote goes tonight, it's not going to go in your favor. I think if you can provide some of the information that the board members here have asked for, you may get close to a lot of support from this board. The three things on the table are information that Mr. Matamor asked for. I won't run down the list, but he asked for quite a bit. Ms. Cruz concerned about the vegetation, and also Mr. Brown in terms of the size. But if you went back to those neighbors with the reassurance of the vegetation, or doing something with vegetation, you went back to them with the size that shows a little smaller and maybe more of a buffer at that point, and there's support there, I think that this board may look at it a little differently. I can tell you when we met, I mean, my concern was the size. It was after the 130, it was at the 122, and for me, it's a little shocking that we're back here at 122, when that was the one concern I raised, and, told you I would look to support it if I could get something in terms of a concession there and work with the community on that. And we're back here at that same exact size from the meeting that we had, which is 122,000 square feet, which not only tells me you didn't look into it, but it's so smack in the face to me that, the assurances I made to you at that meeting, we're sitting here at the same size project. And then to hear the other concerns, I think, again, it's, in my mind, it's still very hard to go from, I call it spot zoning, to go from, and I said this at the first meeting, the most restrictive to least restrictive, because we're talking about housing won't work there, but there are a lot of things in between that may work there. Let's push that to the side if there's a way to get this across the finish line. But the way to get this across the finish line is the concerns that this board addressed. If you want to vote tonight, you'll get a vote tonight up or down. I would guess from the comments I'm hearing, if the vote goes up or down tonight, you're not going to be satisfied. I can't promise you it's going to go through next time. I'm one of 7 members on this board, but I think enough board members have expressed what their issues are that may make this work. I can't speak to that. You guys are the developers. You guys are the applicants. You guys know what you can and can't do. But I think you've heard what the concerns are that have been raised this evening, and it certainly seems a lot more amenable than some of the previous meetings where it may have, seemed like it was told to walk out the door and forget about it. So
Just a comment.
I appreciate your
And I
candor.
just, before you
just go
go
to
to,
Mr. Brown, then I'll turn back over to the applicant.
as long as this project and all the work and effort that you guys have put into this, I think if we get there, we could bring this back in 2 weeks or a month and have it resolved.
One question that will speed things up that we didn't mention tonight, and maybe you've got it covered, but I just don't know it. If the trucks are going to come from the north and go south, how are they going to get there if they don't do that?
Come along Motor Parkway, north past Mill.
Yeah. My concern is you may not have even spoken to those people. Now, the first truck that goes, oh, you have? Well, see, I don't know that.
Everyone.
Every single one.
I'm talking from, what's the name of no, I'm talking about the block that the trucks would enter onto Blydenburg to get to the site. Where would they come from? And isn't that a residential area? Now, if you've seen, you may be able to say to them, look, folks, nothing's gonna happen if you people are gonna fight us on this thing. But if the incline, for example, is not quite what the incline was from the south, and I think that's probably the case.
Got it.
But there's certainly residential up there on the
No,
north. Now, if you've got 95% of those people who are for it, then we're spinning our wheels and bringing that up because you've already solved that problem. I didn't know that.
And
I didn't even know that the trucks are gonna go that way.
I mean, I don't know where you stand on your date, but the next meeting is a month away. The issues that are raised this evening for several of the board members, and my issue that's outstanding since our last meeting, if we can get those addressed, I can't guarantee anything. I'm one of 7 members, but from hearing some of the comments tonight, they may be amenable to doing something. I don't know the answer.
Thank you, Victoria Ryan again. I appreciate all of your comments. Inez, I will address the community outreach. As you know, we've worked together for many years on projects. There's always community opposition on Long Island. If you want to put up a shed, there's somebody in the neighborhood that's not going to like it. It's difficult to get people who are moderately supportive or even neutral. It's hard to motivate them to come to a meeting. I mean, would you come? I've had land use projects in my community too, and I'm in the business. And if I felt neutral about it, I wasn't motivated to go and have my voice heard. So you all know this. I'm just sharing this with you. We did have a lot of supporters at that last meeting. You may remember we had a lot of people from Libby, people that live in Hopog, people that are impacted by the roadways. Those voices count too. We'll do our level best to manage expectations. I don't want this meeting to be adjourned and for the board to expect that we're going to roll in here with, 10 letters of support. It's just, in a project like this, it's not feasible. We've seen many difficult projects in the town of Islip with a significant opposition, but the merits of the project stood on their own and they were subsequently approved. So I just wanted to share that information with you again to manage expectations. We'll do our level best to address your concerns.
I think that's well spoken, but the concern that I have, let's assume that I apologize. Okay. Okay.
Yes, hi. I just want, I understand, and yes, you're right, we can't please everybody, I get that. But I think, for me personally, I think those, on, Mill May Avenue, right, I mean, they're gonna have an entrance right in their backyard. And these, they have that's why I just feel like if you get the outreach from them,
Yeah.
at the very least that they feel comfortable with it and they'll have your numbers to call when things go wrong. I think that would make this, for me, at least feel better because again, they're getting the brunt of this. Especially when you
And
take
again-
down vegetation.
And I
big-
totally
big building
I
in your
totally
backyard.
appreciate that. Just so you know, I did, and Devin came with me on several occasions. I did knock on every door on Mill May on multiple occasions. I think I was in that neighborhood 4 different times. Some people are just never home. But I did speak to quite a few people. And the response that I got was most of them except for 1 or 2, and I encourage you to go back to the record to see how many people came out and spoke against this application that actually live on Mill May. There were only 1 or 2.
Have you
at least-
spoken to them since the latest increase with the buffer?
No.
So I'm just wondering that if there is room, as you said, possibly making it smaller. And again, I know it's hard to.
I haven't personally, but.
I'm saying, I was so talking to, sorry.
Sorry.
And also, as we discussed, and we know this, having people come and speak in front of their peers or their neighbors or the rest sometimes gets them, and we're past the public hearing stage anyway. But a letter of support or an email or anything that says after the latest information and the increased buffer will guarantee, the vegetation issue that she raised, the specifics with the trucks that Mr. Matamore raised, the size shrinking, maybe. My opinion on these always is that the people bought a house without that next to them. But if the people who live there are okay with it and you're not gonna get 100% agreement, but they have agreed to it, when they go to sell their house, that's something that they were in agreement with. Then that doesn't diminish the value of their home. If it in fact does diminish, and I'm not saying it does, but if it does, they've agreed to it. I don't know your timeline. The next meeting is a month away. I can guarantee you back on in a month. I think there are enough.
That was one of my questions.
Yeah, it's 1 month away. I can guarantee you to be on in a month.
To speak, I appreciate the candor of everybody here and man, I wish I'd had this sort of level of detail the course of the last 18 months. I genuinely appreciate it. So I can tell you if, first and foremost, if you can tell me that it's in a month, I will put our team to work in a month and we will do anything and everything.
We could
It's
give you the-
March 7th or whatever March 6th. Isn't it?
I will-
can guarantee it'll be on the agenda.
I
can't
will
guarantee
suffer the
outcome,
slings
but-
and arrows of what I have to do on my side to make that happen. And I think what's important to address is, as Victoria said, I can't promise what additional level of support we're going to get from individual neighbors. I can promise you that we will document further outreach. I can promise you that we will do, specific to your comments, Ms. Cruz, maybe a more detailed impact study of what they're actually going to see from, let's say, Milne, because we intentionally put the trucks on the north side of the property. That is only employee parking. And what probably doesn't really show up well on a site plan is there's a grade change there. So they're not even going to see the cars because there's like an 8-foot grade change. We're building a retaining wall. The cars are going to sit below. All right. We'll do some additional homework on what vegetation can be saved, and we'll speak to what type of new vegetation we're going to put in, because there's like the maintain the existing, and then there's the new buffer. Provide some more detail on that. To speak to Mr. Friedland, I know that there was the prior application, years ago was, I think it was 103,000 square feet of warehouse and then 80,000 square feet of self-storage. What I want more than anything else is I want an economically viable project, because an economically viable project allows me to bring in the best possible tenant, allows me to cut the best possible deal. And I'm the type of guy that would rather get a little bit less rent from a better tenant, because that's what's going to provide better jobs, better input to the community. All right. So I can't promise I can get all the way down to that number, but I'm going to reduce,
That's
and
where
we're
this
going to.
conversation started, is with my question to reduce. So don't forget that part of it.
I can guarantee you there will be a reduction, and I'm going to crunch
Okay.
every number I can.
And I think that'd be looked on very favorable by this board. The other things I'd like to say to Ms. Ryan's comments is that I'm actually surprised if there's so much opposition that there's nobody here tonight in the audience to, they can't speak. It's not a public hearing, but on hearings that we have where people are really opposed to, you do get a crowd.
Okay.
So with that being said, Mr. Chairman, are you ready for a motion?
And just to reiterate where we're at, the vegetation, the neighbors, again, you've increased the buffer significantly. If you're going to drop the square footage of it. And something, Mr. Kennedy, that I know you said you didn't have an answer to my original question, from the most restrictive to the least restrictive. I got that back. Yeah, that's correct. But maybe some of the zones in between, what would go there would not be feasible. Maybe
No
a way
problem.
to
I'll do
answer
that.
that.
We've done that homework.
Right, which is a way to answer that question without.
We're currently at like 210. If I get below 210, we don't have a fair amount of money. Once I get below that number, it becomes an inefficient area. You don't get a good deal. Even if it was 1,000,000 square feet, if it was a long vicinity, it doesn't work. So my goal is, I'm going to attempt to shift up a little bit, to the best of my knowledge, but then I'm going to shift this way.
You're the expert on that. You come back, and I'm happy, Mr. Kennedy, if you want to have a meeting again prior to coming back in March, I'm happy to sit down and spend the time with you. I made one suggestion at that meeting. The reason I've been steadfast where I'm at is you came back with the same exact number.
I always appreciate your time, Mr. Chairman, and I take your recommendations with great seriousness.
We're back here at the same number.
You have to understand, to what Scott mentioned earlier, the cost of this project has skyrocketed. Losing every foot there is negatively impacting him. Until this conversation, I did not think a reduction in size was.
He's telling the God's honest.
I never thought that was on the table. I was pushing for a vote, trust me.
All right, so let's get this done.
Nothing further from the board. I'm going to go to, anything further from the applicant?
No, thank you for your time and your comments, everyone.
Is there a motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a motion that we reserve decision tonight and bring it back on the March 6th, is it?
And the next meeting.
Our next meeting.
So as a motion to reserve decision, we'll bring the application back at our next meeting, which we believe is March the 6th. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Frugieri, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, we're reserved. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Anything further from the board? No. Is there a motion? By Mr. Moriarty to adjourn, second. By Mr. Frugieri, all in favor, opposed, abstentions, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Whoever he or she may be.